Good morning, Peacock.
Good morning, travel bestie.
How
How's
are
it
you
going?
doing this morning?
It's good. No, I always start off with the weather. The weather is a little gloomy. Sun wants to come out. We're not quite sure, but that's okay. It's
Definitely gloomy. I don't know. I feel like every time we do a podcast, it's gloomy, and we were
I
expecting it
know.
to be sunny, but it's okay. But I'm excited about today's guest. I'm excited to introduce
Yeah.
Michelle Seijas. We're so excited to have her on our podcast today. And we have so many questions because I think that a lot of people, are not really informed about the line of work that you do. So we'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself, give us the whole spiel of who, what, where, when, and why.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to be here. So I am Michelle Seijas, and I am a leadership coach. I work mostly with Latinas, but generally women of color in leadership spaces. And what I support people with is finding value in their strengths, growing their confidence, having a clear vision for their life and career, and building sustainability into leadership, because we have way too many women of color who are burning out in leadership. And so that can be through one-on-one coaching. It can be through group programs that I run. And then also I do a lot of speaking and, workshops and facilitation and stuff like that too.
I was gonna say double wow. I'm like, check, check, check. Like we all need Michelle in our lives. This is absolutely great. So I have a question for you. We talked. You mentioned a series of things, but the key word that came out to me was burnout. Right? We know how many women, particularly women of color, that are experiencing either in high position, high functioning roles, and we do it well. But there does come a time for when you really have to kind of give yourself that break. But I wanted to go into, can you tell us a little bit about the trauma informed coaching that you do?
Yeah. So the trauma informed aspect of it is I'm acknowledging that you are a whole person who has had a whole bunch of life experience before you ever step in the room with me. So there are life experiences we had in our past that are showing up with us currently and impacting the way that we're showing up in the world. So trauma informed means that the collection of all your experiences are going to inform how we engage with each other. And I want to also be very conscious of not re-triggering any sort of trauma that you've experienced. So I can give you an example that just happened this week. I had a client. I do some deep dive days sometimes where I'll spend like a large chunk of time with someone. And so I had a client I was spending 5 hours with this week. And this is a person who runs a nonprofit that's navigating a lot of the stuff going on in the political landscape right now. They were running late. I could tell by the way they were messaging me. They were already frazzled before they even got in the room. They walk in the room. I can just energetically already feel like there's a lot of anxiety here. This person is exhausted. Like they're running on fumes. And so the whole purpose of the day was strategy. And she's like immediately apologizing. And I said, hey, let's just check in with you for a minute. How's your body feel right now? What does your body need? And she was like, I'm feeling very anxious. I'm feeling cool. Would you feel comfortable maybe doing some breathing exercises and a little bit of somatic work before we even talk about anything else? She was like, I think that'd be good. So I put on some humming music to create some vibration in the room. We did some deep breathing. I kind of walked her through it. I was like, if you need to cry, like let it out. If you're feeling kind of more anxious, anger, get up and walk around the room. I had rented like a co-working space for us. And then after we went through all of that, we kind of debriefed. And then I said, have you eaten today? And she said, I haven't. I said, why don't we take a little walk in the neighborhood, go get you some food. We'll get out, breathe some air, and then we'll come back and then we can start getting going on what's going on. So we walked out, we got some food, we came back, completely different person. And then I was like, what do we want to work on today? So all of that was acknowledging there is a lot of energy that she was bringing into the space. There's a lot of feelings she already has. Her body's literally having a reaction. I mean, I could feel it when she walked in the room. So trauma informed is we can't just work on the thing in front of us. We have to acknowledge the whole person and all of their experiences to actually even be able to get to the work. And so all of that needed to happen to then be able to strategize difficult conversations with her staff, navigating her board, all that other stuff. Because if not, we would have just been putting all that anxious energy into anything we would have done for her that day.
Yeah, where were you like 5 years ago? Like I needed you in my life 5 years ago. Like really, seriously, between COVID and being burnt out and, having to deal with executives that are, full of caca and just all of it, right? Meanwhile, you're dealing with home issues. Like that's the kind of coaching we definitely needed at that time. But, it's never too late. So, it's
Yeah.
always a good
I mean,
thing. But
coaching I needed. I mean, I say all the time, I'm offering to people what Michelle, I used to be a leader in high school. I was high school principal. I was a nonprofit executive director. Like, I wish I would have had me. And so part of this is also, what does it look like for a Latina who's been in many of those seats to now be able to work alongside of you, understand what you're experiencing, being able to pull those things out that likely your boss can't because they don't identify or they don't even know what's going on. Like, I wish I had me 5 years ago.
I wish we would have, Michelle would have been in the peacock moment that we came up on the emotional support. That's when we needed Michelle to come by in that exact moment.
Michelle, that brings a different perspective to what you're feeling, and that you validate what one is feeling, especially being a professional and, kind of going through these things. Because as a lot of people know who are in the professional world, whether it's advertising or hospital or being a police officer, whatever it is, teacher, like the minute you walk in to the minute you walk out, you are on 10 level of stress. And so at some point you just learn how to deal with it and live with it and really do not address it. I told Anna not too long ago that I bought an Aura ring because I wanted to check to see my stress levels. I want to know because I don't even know if I'm stressed anymore because I've been stressed all my life. And then I told her that my stress level is literally here the minute I wake up, the minute I open my eyes. And the only time I don't have stress and it's called restore, is when I'm watching television. That's the only time. And as soon as I turn off the TV, it goes right back up. So I think that sometimes we just start living in it and we don't even know it, but it's really damaging. And so having someone to help you recognize it and help you kind of just take a step back, like you help that person out, to take a breather and, walk around, cry if you have to. Those are very important elements of recognizing and then dealing with it after you've been through coaching. You don't know those things.
So are there any misconceptions that you've come across when you're working with women that are in leadership roles? Has there been anything that stands out to you when you're having these sessions?
So I think the thing that stands out is that anytime I even mention it, like, I do a discovery call with somebody who's interested and we're chit-chatting, is everybody feels this need to preface, I had a good childhood. And I'm kind of like, well, I didn't even ask, but thank you for letting me know that, right? And I think there's this assumption that if I need trauma-informed support, it has to be because like all this like intense stuff happened in my youth. I'm not a therapist. I'm not walking you through like all that stuff. We're just acknowledging that all of that stuff is now how you show up as a leader. Like there's no way we can ignore that. If we were, I'll use myself as an example again, lone wolf syndrome. I grew up with some strong ass Latinas who were very much like, you don't need a man, you don't need a man, you don't need a man. We just take care of stuff ourselves. We do stuff. True. And I've spent so much of my life trying to prove I don't need anybody. And so it's now, that is a trauma response. So it doesn't have to be, I didn't have a roof over my head, I didn't have food or any of those types of things. Like there's other things that have happened in our lives that have just informed who we are now. And is it actually helping us or not? So I feel like there's this assumption that you have to have this horrible story of something that happened to you to be able to actually need to have some support to see you differently than just your job or just the thing that you're kind of putting in front. And so for a lot of us, I work with a lot of women who have similar to what I just said. Lone wolf, I don't need other people. And so they want to do everything by themselves. Part of why we burn out. I also have people on the other side of the spectrum. I never had a voice. I don't feel confident. I move into leadership seats and I actually speak less than I did before because I'm scared I'm going to lose everything. I don't really talk a lot about imposter syndrome because I think we need to get a lot deeper than that. But imposter syndrome comes up a lot of times when folks first chat with me. So there's all kinds of things you've experienced in the past that are the reason why you show up that way now as an adult. Let's just get into it. I heard a stat once, I think this was from Dr. Schwartz, that says that 70% of how we show up as an adult is actually because of things that happened to us before we were 10 years old. So do we want to lead as a 10-year-old or do we want to lead as, in my case, a 45-year-old, right? And so you got to engage with these things to be able to actually make sure you're showing up the way you want to.
Damn, that stung a little.
Girl, there's so many Latinas. We all had this experience. Yes, we probably did. Similar.
Like my whole life. You don't need a man. We can do everything. You need to go to school so you don't have to depend on a man. The same, very, very feminist based family. I mean, back to my great grandma, like she owned us a bar in the 20s, which, I think it's unheard of. But yeah, very, very base. But I feel like we were raised in the same house. So yeah, I'm afraid to even know who the 10-year-old me was. At this point, I got to go back and check. I got to look at some pictures and remind myself, because if I'm showing up like that, oh my God.
For me, it struck a nerve because I grew up with my dad. But my dad always told me, be independent. Don't depend on anybody. No man, nothing. You figure it out. And I've grown up with that concept. So I don't tend to ask for help. My husband, he's very supportive. I have no complaints. But I don't ask for anything. because in my head, I got to figure it out. I got to have it all. And so I have always wondered, because why did my dad have that instilled in me? Like, I have that in my head. Like, you stand on your own 2 feet. And I've passed that on to my kids. Stand on your own 2 feet, figure it out. Don't ask for questions.
Mhm.
And now I'm like, oh, that's probably not the best thing. And I'm working, I just submitted, just a really quick side note. I'm doing a TEDx, and it starts off the story of my little 5-year-old self, of being the one translating, doing this. And it's like, now everything you're saying, I'm like, oh, Michelle, I think I needed you.
I mean, yeah. I
Yep.
mean, if you think about it, there's probably, if you could pinpoint so many things that are showing up today that all came from something back then, right? And God bless these women, like they needed that to survive, right? But I have to remember, like my grandmother came here, she was escaping domestic violence, she had babies, it was the fees. She showed up in the United States and she met another man, had more kids, found a job. Like she actually became the founder of clinics and a church and all this stuff. She literally did have to carry herself across to a whole other country by herself. But I
That's
am
right.
not in the same situation, but I'm behaving in the same way. So what does it look like to now be in a place where I have like a community of support around me, and I have degrees, and I have, some financial security and things like that she didn't have? I don't need to be as hard, but I still behave like I need to be that hard.
Oof, that.
So I want to say that we have a friend, and
Mhm.
she got her doctorate degree. And we're talking, and she was saying that she was ready to retire, but she was afraid to retire because our parents have instilled in us that we need to work 30 years, get the retirement, like nothing
Mhm.
outside of the norm of what they did. And she was like, well, what if I can't make any money? And I said, well, you can do consulting. And she was like, yeah, but what if I can't? I said, you have a doctorate degree. We are not our parents. And in that moment, I think it was kind of like, oh, wow, you're right. I am not my parents. I am not an immigrant. I have all these degrees. If I had to, I can go and, get a job like this because you have a doctorate degree. But it's to say what you were saying, like you somehow still inherit your parents' struggles, and you feel like you're still living their life when it's not their life. Thank God that they sacrificed so much for us so we wouldn't have to, but somehow we've incorporated that into us.
Yeah, yeah. I that's actually become a hot topic in my world. Is I didn't think I was going to be coaching people through retirements, but I actually have had clients, and I have one. I just did a discovery call this week with Latinas who are like, I don't even know what it looks like to go into a phase in my life where I'm not working 60 hours a week, and I'm not having somebody tell me what to do every day, all day, and all of this, because you're just so used to like go, 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 and just do what I'm told to do. This is all the things that I was told were success. I did it, whatever. What am I going to do with myself if I don't have that anymore? And so it's almost like this identity crisis. And I've had multiple people who've said, I need you to help me figure out what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like in my body to not have somewhere to go every day, something to do, and all of that. And so I think it's there's multiple transition points that I think are really important in our lives, but that's one that I've realized over and over again. For those of us who've been these hard workers who are constantly functioning in the ways that we were told to, it is like completely foreign to be like, oh, now I just get to own my time and be me and be easeful and chill. And it already doesn't feel comfortable, and I'm not even there yet.
Sandy, what does that sound like? This is like this is where trauma informed and travel start to connect. I
Mhm.
am blown away because everything you just said is what we listen to when women travel with us. Who am I? We started providing this opportunity because we ourselves, when we retired, we left our titles, we left all the roles and the expectations that people had of us. And it's like, okay, what am I going to do now that I don't have to get up and get on the freeway and drive and be somewhere? And now we have the freedom to choose where we want to be. And so when women talk to us, they tell us, they're like, we don't know who we are. And so we've always said, we want you to come on this trip, take off all the hats, forget the expectations, just pack and go and follow us. So this is where I start to realize like this is deeper work than we were doing this because this is what our passion. Sandy and I both believe in what we do because it really was very healing for us when we took our first trip with our kids. To be able to be free, to say that we're going to go for 2 weeks, but now we're gone for 6 weeks. And we didn't have to ask for PTO, we didn't have to get approvals, we didn't have to call in, none of that. And to be able to offer this platform now, and just tell them, just open the door. We got the rest of it for you. Now I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, oh my God, Michelle, like, where have you been our lives? This is exactly what we're doing. Do you think, or do you see, you're coaching these women and you're walking them through their process, because I imagine everybody has a different, this is not a one
Mhm.
size fit all. There's no
Yeah.
cookie cut, formula. But do you see what we're seeing as incorporating the travel, and where the connection is?
Totally. I mean, an exercise I put together for a talk earlier this year that now I've kind of just been doing with clients one-on-one sometimes is, let's actually define what authenticity and who you are in this season looks like. A lot of times there's just identities that just kind of keep rolling together and we just keep moving in the same direction, right? And we don't ever pause to think like, how much of that actually did I choose, or was given to me by society, or given to me by my family? How many of us still going by the same damn nickname from when we were 5 years old? And I'm like, that's just not me anymore, right? And I mean, like, one thing I will say, like, thinking about society, I used to be married. I'm just going to have babies. And it never felt right. And I always kind of had this resistance and I always had this reason not to. And finally, it was like, that is actually not an identity I want to hold, but society has put it on me and I've been carrying it for a long time. And I finally had to tell, my ex, I'm never going to have a baby. It's just not mine. It's not an identity I actually am choosing. It was one that was given to me and I'm deciding I don't want it. So I think there's just points in our lives where we have to actually make a decision. Who am I? And travel is this place where you have all this free time. I mean, you're moving, you're doing activities, but you have a lot of time to think. You're sitting on a 16-hour flight. You're sitting on 2-hour bus rides or whatever it is. You're on a camel in the middle of a desert for an hour. Like, your mind has all this time to be thinking about things you normally don't have time to think about. And that's where it kind of starts to be like, who am I? Who am I in this moment on this trip that I don't get to be when I'm at home? How do I want to bring this back with me? Are there things that I don't have to be here that I don't want to have to pick up again when I go back? I took a 6-month sabbatical, and for part of that sabbatical, a few years back, I traveled. And I'm not going to lie, the last day of the trip, I was in Paris. I ended the trip in Paris. Tuileries Garden is one of my favorite places. I'm hanging there at sunset. I'm thinking like I'm having my moment before I go home. And I just started sobbing. And I remember I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, why am I crying my eyes out at this beautiful moment in Paris before I go home? And I realized it was because I felt like I couldn't be that person when I was going to get back home again. And so like when I was just like, but Michelle, you have all this opportunity to still be the woman who is leisurely and has ease and hangs out in rose gardens and reads books in the middle of the afternoon. But I didn't allow myself that unless it was on vacation. And so when I came back, I had a rose garden literally 6 blocks from my apartment that I had not been to. And I've been living there for who knows how many years. So then I was like, when you get back, your butt's going to that rose garden. You're going to take a book. You're going to start hanging out there. And so it was like this epiphany of just like, you don't have to keep having these different identities when you're like in travel mode, and when you're at home mode, try to figure out like how it comes together. So I think you just have all this time to think, and you get to make some choices about who you are when you come back from these, really adventurous trips.
I want to be transparent though with the listeners. And I did not transition from our last role to the current role so easily. We didn't wake up one day and say, oh, we're going to travel and it's going to be all great. We had to mourn the loss of our titles, because we were too. We didn't know who we were if we weren't the directors, if we weren't the administrators. So it took a while. It felt like someone had died.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say for me, it happened 2020. It took me at least 3 years to get over that hump, that I was no longer in that role, that I was no longer going to be helping people in my community that's what I went to school for. That's what I devoted my whole career to. And so it was not an easy transition by, I don't want people to think that Anna and I woke up one day and we're like, okay, we're quitting and we're going to do this and we're going to do it. No, it took a long time. It took a lot of talking to each other and, what do I do now? And what do we put on our title? Because titles are a big thing, especially I think for first gen. It's a big deal because our parents have been like, mi hija la administradora, mi hija la abogada, mi hija la doctora, mi hija la profesora. Like, it's a big deal for them. So it was really hard to shed and just to say, no more. Here we are. So I want the listeners to, what you were saying earlier before you were talking about the travel, that it's not an easy transition by far. It does take some time. Like you were saying, you even were crying that you were going to leave Paris because you knew that when you got back to the States, the problems that you had in Paris are not the problems you have back in home. And so, and the expectations, right? Because when you're abroad, like, you don't have any problems. You don't even have bills.
No.
Those bills can wait till I get back, but then you get back and it's like someone just throws cold water in your face, like, welcome home, back to your problems. But I love the fact that you were able to say, no, I can continue living the same life, just in a different continent, right? I have a rose garden down the street. I can continue to live that And I can do it in any place that I'm at to continue feeling what you were feeling when you were in Paris.
I think, Sandy, that's exactly it. I mean, you brought it completely a full circle, because never did we imagine what that transition was going to look like, and much less now in us speaking, there's experts that specialize in this kind of, like Sandy and I had no idea. We've always just managed our own trauma, not, first of all, not recognizing it. That's what you said. I mean, everything you have said from the get-go, I'm like, oh my God. Like these light bulbs, like if you could picture, I have all these light bulbs. I'm like, oh my God. And they're all connecting. I'm like, wow. Is there something, and I know that this is very deep work and it's not something that's going to just change in a day, because for sure, Sandy and I, and to continue the full transparency, there are still moments that we doubt ourselves. And,
Mm-hmm.
I'll call Sandy and be like, listen, what? And she's like, no, 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 no. She snaps me out of it. And vice versa. We always tell people everybody needs a peacock, because it helps you, kind of balance yourself out. But is there anything that you can share, a tool that people can put into practice in everyday life, so that, you're in that moment and you just like, okay, I don't see how I'm going to get past this? Or is there something, a mindset tool or something physically that you suggest that they can start with?
Yeah. I would say, just at a start, check in with your body. I am not a morning person. So it takes me a while to get out of bed. So I'm like, well, why don't I just utilize this time? So I'll usually turn on 10 minutes of a meditation, or I might turn on a song. Sometimes I'm just like, I don't even feel like doing that. I'm just going to deep breathe for 10 minutes. And it's just breathing, feeling the air coming into my body, feeling it coming out. Anything feel stiff? Anything feel like it needs something? Are there any thoughts that are starting to come up already that I need to engage with? Because if not, this is going to be like my mindset, my thought for the whole day. We just don't even take enough time to just sit and check in with what's actually happening here. We're just move, move, move. And so
Yes.
part of the reason why we end up with overwhelm and stress is because it just keeps accumulating. So I tell people, I don't have kids, but I worked in education for a long time. I get how little kids work. If you had a little kid who came up to you and was like, I need your attention, and you were like, not now. And then they kept kind of pulling on you. Not now, not now. What are they eventually going to do? They're going to go ahead and pee their pants. They're going to scream. They're going to cry. They're going to start crying. Whatever the thing was that they needed you to take care of in that moment that you didn't is going to become way bigger than it was. Same thing with our bodies and our feelings. If there's a little nagging feeling in your shoulder, what's going on there? Is there something that's causing that tension, that stiffness, that whatnot, that you can address now so that it doesn't have to be later on, oh, I got to go to physical therapy for 6 months because I screwed up my shoulder? Is there a thought that's rolling around in your head that if you just took a minute to sit with it and be like, that's not true, this is what I want to believe instead, or this is what I know is true instead, then later you're not going to be spinning out, I can't get out of bed because I'm just stressed out over this thing and I can't function. But honestly, a lot of the times the stress and the overwhelm is because we don't just take a few minutes to just check in with ourselves regularly. And when you check in with yourself, then there's a variety of things you can do, right? There might be movement, there might be breath work, maybe you're into yoga, maybe you're into going out to nature. There's different things that each one of us needs to then figure out how to find our calm, our regulation. But at a starting base, can we just breathe and check in with our body at least once a day, if not multiple times throughout the day?
That's very yeah, but that's great advice, because who else knows your body better, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm always scolding poor Anna, because Anna always says to me, I don't have time to get sick. I said, girl, you better find time, because when we travel for long periods of time, we come back and we're either sick or we're run down because we're working. It's kind of like now, we don't schedule anything like the week that we come back from our trips. Like
Yeah.
we really try to just kind of lay low so we can kind of catch up. But you're right. Your body is the first thing that's going to give you a signal that it has an issue, because, and you know what, working in a hospital, it's like me smoking and me telling you not to smoke. Same thing, right? We
Yeah.
know what happens. We've seen it in the hospitals. We've seen what's happening, but it's different when you have to practice it yourself.
Yeah.
But I think that that's great advice for women out there who are in a situation right now where they have symptoms and they're like, I'll take care of it tomorrow. I'll take care of it tomorrow. I will. And unfortunately, like that little kid that keeps pulling on you, it's going to be a bigger mess at the end. So I think that's great advice. And thank you for that.
Yeah. And to tie it to travel, actually, I travel a ton like you all. I have a whole routine now of ways that I take care of myself, because I actually don't love flying. I fly a ton, but I don't love it. And so like there's something about the smell of the gas and, you know, their body's going through these changes as you're going into air, whatever. Like I can just feel really unsettled on a flight. I have things I preset, like music that's on my phone. I'm a pretty good sleeper, but I still make sure I have some melatonin. I might have just certain things. I don't drink. I do tons of water when I'm flying because it helps me. Once I land wherever I'm going, if I can do it right away, I will. If not, then I'll do it that night before I go to bed. I have a little stretching routine I'll do to get all the kinks out of my body so then I can kind of feel ready for whatever I'm about to experience in the new city. I like to have chamomile tea. Usually you can find it at the hotel. If not, I have little packets of tea that I pack with me. So it's kind of like that moment at the end. I love a hot bath. So there's certain things that just help me to also just take care of my body when I'm traveling, because sometimes we just are so excited that we're about to go on this trip that we just like hit the ground running and your body's like, whoa, we just had this whole ass experience that like we have not recovered from. And now you're going to start throwing me into all these adventures. And so and also, you know, I'm 45 now. So my body also can't function the way it used to. I'm not doing red eyes and then just hopping to work at 2 hours later. So now it's like I have this whole routine. Like, how do I take care of my body? How do I check in with myself to make sure I'm actually in a place to even experience and enjoy the trip I just, you know, started?
Sandy, we need to establish a whole routine like Michelle. You need to be like Michelle. You know, we take the red eye flight and we hit the ground running.
Well, I've established a senora routine. No, we've established a senora routine. I have to have a scarf because the airplane's too cold. And if the air hits my neck, you know, I'm going to be sick. So I got to make sure that's taken care of. And, you know, we start taking all our emergency oregano pills like 1 week before, because God forbid, I'm telling you right now, I was in Austria, me dio un vientecito en la oreja, and I was down, girl. I had freaking fever. It was a mess. I came back from Morocco. Again, I had pneumonia. Like, because we give it 135%, right? And then as soon as we're on the airplane coming home, we're already done. We're like, my body. But this time, you know, we came back from Cuba. The only thing my body wanted was for me to sleep. And I slept 12 hours 2 days ago and I'm good. So I think we're on our way to practicing exactly what you practice, Michelle, without the little T.
I know. I have to work. I'm so bad. I know breathing helps. That's one of the things that I don't know what it is, but when I'm trying to do it, I'm like, how is this helping me? I'm like, okay. But because I'm so used to taking action, and when I say action, like something major, you know, Anna can't just go do yoga. Anna wants to go do HIIT. Anna's body, it says no. Okay.
Damn, Anna, you can't do yoga, you gotta do HIIT. Jesus.
But those are the extreme, but it's because this is what we've done. But my little 53-year-old body is telling Anna, sit your ass down. That's not going to happen, because then you're going to come back with an injury. And, you know, to the point what Sandy was saying, the senora era, like, okay, we've entered the senora era and we have to be very careful with all the things around us. But breathing does help. And I have to stop being hard-headed and do it. Because I don't know about you, Sandy, but when I'm trying to meditate, I start. I'm really good about starting. But then they keep talking, and all of a sudden, why am I already thinking of the 5 different things that are pending for me that need to be done yesterday? And it's like, Anna, bring it back. And I struggle with that.
I don't even meditate. I don't even start because I can't.
You see?
My little self-diagnosed ADHD does not allow me to do it. I can't. There you go. I can't.
But let me just say that that's normal. Like, I've been doing it for years, and that happens to me too. Like, I sometimes will do like the meditations on the Peloton app, and 10 minutes went by, and I'm like, what did she say? Because like because I was distracted. Right. And then I'll be like, oh, that means that there's actually a lot already that's going to be messing with me today. Even if I didn't fully get the rest, that's a signal to me. We're going to take some breaks throughout the day today to maybe go back and try this again. So I feel like there's this impression that like meditation is actually like you get to this point. Yeah, you see the people who are like so zen, they can do it for an hour with nothing. Most of us are not going to get to that point. The idea, though, is that you're training your brain not to keep trying to figure out all the things that are going to go wrong. Because when I have a client sometimes I was like, let's just follow that thread of thought. Where does it always end? I'm going to be homeless and I'm going to have food and I'm going to die. Like, so when you really let your brain just keep going, even though it seems like the simplest thought, like it's really your brain going into survival mode, we're going to die. So like, honestly, you just having that practice of like, I'm breathing and I'm just going to keep bringing it back is just you doing a slight training of your brain to like not go to like the worst places when it's like, no, this is reality. I just want to keep bringing you back to reality. That's actually part of the practice. So it's okay. It's totally part of it.
Okay, well, I feel great to know that. I mean, thank God then. I guess, you know what it is? At this age, you should have everything down. So I should be able to meditate like Julia Roberts and Eat, Pray, Love, right? Like just sit there and do it throughout the whole hour, right? But I guess that requires practice. So I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm gonna give it a shot. So I don't know. I can't promise anything.
Maybe when you go to Bali.
Right? I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna at least take a picture of it. Take a picture of me, Anna, trying to meditate like Julia Roberts.
At least make it real.
We're gonna tag you, Michelle. These are our efforts in trying to meditate.
Michelle, tell us do you only work with organizations or nonprofits, or do you work with individuals as well? So if somebody was interested in contacting you, do you work with individuals as well?
Yeah, I do the mix. So this whole thing started during the pandemic. Like I had gotten certified as a coach and had done all this stuff when I had my last job. In the back of my mind, I was like, at some point I'll do something with this. And then when the pandemic hit, I actually ended up writing a group coaching program. It was based off my 6-month sabbatical and all the exercises and the work I did to get clear on identity, to transition out of the K-12 space and just kind of create a whole new life for myself. And so I launched it. So this whole business started with group coaching and specifically with my program, Chingona Sabbatical. And then from there, I started doing one-on-one clients. And then eventually it's evolved into organizations that are like, you know what? I have one client right now with my K-12 background. They're like, we have a group of women of color who we think are going to be principals soon, but we think that they should be coached by a woman of color who can understand their experiences and how they're going to have to think about different things moving into leadership than, maybe a man would. And so I'm coaching them and prepping them for this, and their organization thought about pairing us to do that. So it's kind of a mix. Thankfully, there's a lot of organizations these days who are seeing the importance of coaching and having somebody, especially for women of color, that can specialize in supporting them in a way that maybe the organization can't. And then along with that, then I also have one-on-one folks who reach out to me who just say, I just know I need this and let's just partner up and make it happen. So it can, however folks find me, as long as they feel like I'm a fit for what they're looking for, like I'm happy to work together. Sometimes it's through their org, sometimes it's because they find me on their own.
How did you come up with the name? I was going to ask you before they say, how did you come up with the name Thriving Chingona?
Ooh, girl, there's a whole story behind that. Actually, it came from, I haven't talked about this in a while. It came from a coach that I had. So my first time working with a coach who was working with me through executive coaching, it was when I was an executive director of a nonprofit. And she was this phenomenal Latina who had created actually a group coaching certification program, which is a program I ended up going through for coaches of color in the Bay Area. And so anyway, she was my coach and we were kind of talking about some of what you and I, we've been talking about so far. I can respect and honor the journey that my grandmother went through, my mom did, but you always see chingona como mi madre, chingona como mi abuela. And I was like, but there's something about that just doesn't sit well with me because I feel like we're idolizing the hustle, the struggle, the grit, the resilience. But again, I don't want to have to do that. I am not an undocumented woman with little kids trying to survive in a new country. So why do I still feel this need to identify with the hustle and the resilience? So there was something as we were talking, and I think I must have somehow said at some point, because I remember I was literally jotting a bunch of different things in a notebook, and I was writing surviving, thriving, chingona, all this stuff. And I was like, you know what? My grandmother was a chingona because of survival. I want to be a chingona because of thriving. And then that's where the idea kind of started to evolve. And so it was I don't have to take away that my grandma was a chingona. I can still want to be a chingona, but the definitions and what it looks like to be chingona is the part that needs to evolve. And so to me, and the women who've done my program, I call them Thriving Chingonas. I actually, each one of them, I buy them a nameplate necklace that says Thriving Chingona. I don't have mine on today, but I have one. And it's this embodiment of we can continue the legacy of being chingonas, but we don't need to continue it in the same way. We are ancestors' wildest dreams, but we also get to have our own dreams. And we get to define what this all looks like ourselves. And so what's the evolution of all these kind of sayings and thoughts that we have in honoring ancestors? How do we actually take it to the next level to allow ourselves to have a whole different experience than they did?
I love that story.
I haven't told that story in so long. Thanks for asking.
I love that story. And it's exactly that. We're thriving. We honor, we acknowledge, but we get the privilege of being able to thrive at a whole other level. I think that's amazing. So how can our listeners find you? Where do they find you?
Well, they can find me at Thriving Chingona on Instagram. That is my handle. And then I'm also on LinkedIn, Michelle Seijas, EDD. And then my website, michelleseijas.com. I have a weekly email series where I actually share a lot of what Latinas are experiencing and what I'm seeing as themes in the coaching and the work that I'm doing with leaders of color. So in there, I share, Like, for example, maybe I would have shared the story that I shared with you all at the beginning of like, are you taking care of yourself right now? Have you taken a breath? Have you eaten some food? Because you need to do that before you can be doing the strategic work you need to be doing right now. Tips and tricks and things like that. So if you head to my email, to my website, you can also add yourself to my email list as well to get on that email list.
That is so
This was an
fantastic.
awesome. Yes, absolutely.
It's really definitely a much needed different level of coaching, because I think that when people think of coaching, they think about, nutrition or working out or coaching you how to get a job or interviewing process. This is a different type of coaching that really just kind of folds in all aspects of your life so you can show up the better version of you. And it's a very much needed type of coaching. And we thank you so much, Michelle, for really bringing it forward, letting our listeners know that you are here to help them if they need this type of coaching. We're so honored to be your friend. She lives around the corner from my house. So it's so great. It was just meant to be, Michelle.
I know. Well, and I sat next to Anna at a dinner, and that turned into finding out you were my neighbor. And then, like, what do you know? Here we are.
Here we are.
Here we are. But so if you can give one word of advice to our listeners before we end our session here, what would it be?
Ooh, in terms of travel, go out there and do it. It will completely change your mindset of who you are, what your life looks like. You will see so many different aspects of the world that have you bring back new opportunities to bring into your world. There's so many things I've experienced in travel that I've brought back that are now just various parts of my life. And so it just helps us to be more well-rounded and thoughtful people about who we are in the world.
Yay. Yes. We agree with you 100%. And thank you so
100%.
much. Thank you so much, Michelle. And we really look forward to talking to you and, interacting on Instagram and social media and also traveling with you. So thank you again. I know you're a very, very busy lady, but we really do appreciate you taking time to come on our podcast. And to our listeners, if you have not signed up for a newsletter, please do so. If you can go to our Instagram, _peacocks_travel. And in the links, you'll see that there's a link there so you can sign up for our newsletter. Follow us also. And then if you get on the newsletter, you get to find out about all the great trips that we're offering in 2025 and 2026. And so any last words, Peacock?
I want to say that it has been a complete awakening for me just listening to Michelle, what you shared. I mean, everything you have shared has been check, 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 check. And I hope that, we now do a better job of knowing that awareness, and that we know even better that we have a friend that we can go to and that our followers could follow and learn from you. So thank you so much, Michelle. We really, really appreciate it. To all our followers, please, this is a real, what do you say? It's part of life, but it's something that, she's given us some tools that we can start working with. So thank you again. And I hope to see more travel besties on our future trips.
Thank you, Peacock. Thank you, Michelle. Until next time, everyone, have a great weekend.